over to 7 o'clock. Are we on? We're on. We're running. We are good to go. Yeah. All right. Welcome. I'd like to start off with the statement of acknowledgement. Is that we would like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today as the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Item 2 is the attendance record. So we've got a couple of apologies, being Christine Hahn and Nathan Shanks, who's a last minute apology due to a back injury. The motions to grant a leave of absence, is none. Any leave of absence, none. And no non-attendance. Everyone that's not here has lodged an apology. All right. Item 3 is the declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No? None noted? All right. Item 4 is the confirmation of the minutes. We just want to confirm the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 6th of February and the special Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 2nd of April 2024 be confirmed. So yes, moved by Mayor Redman, seconded. It's going to be a fast meeting. By Peter Fairley-Jones. Okay, done. It's 3. Fast game's a good game. Okay. And are there any business arising from the minutes? No. Okay. Sorry, we're going to increase the cadence. Okay. Item 6 are the decision reports. 6.1 is the External Auditor's Management Letter for the FY24 interim audit. The recommendation being that the Audit and Risk Committee notes the interim audit management letter, which includes management response contained in attachment 1. Do we have any questions or comments? I don't have Galpin's here. Any comments? Anyone want to speak to the report?
I'll start off and then might defer to Erin and Renee because they were probably more involved in the audit. So obviously this is just a stock standard audit, interim audit visit that they undertake each year. As the report says, it's the emphasis on the internal controls and how we're performing against those controls that are reviewed. We tend to maintain a fairly high effectiveness of our internal control environment. There's a couple of findings. One in relation to, I suppose, the banking. I think that from our perspective is that the sample that they selected was probably a poor sample, which we explained. However, they didn't extend that sampling to, I suppose, verify our comments, but we'll take that on board. We acknowledge that from an accounts payable perspective of the audit trail and changes to the supplier master file, that was probably just a bit of a lapse in from an operational perspective, which has now been rectified, and the fixed asset, the building asset management plan, which I think I'll refer to Wendy because I believe that that's coming up to council within the June council meeting. So that has progressed well, so that will be in June that gets presented to council. So I think that I'll take our response to the findings as read and open it up to any questions that any members might have.
Yep. Mayor Redman.
I'm on page 12 of 203, and we recommend that council prioritise the moderate risk findings as failure in compensating controls addressing the same risk or existence of multiple moderate weakness within the same business cycle may lead to a material weakness and non-compliance with S 125 of the Local Government Act. So how are you going to manage your moderate risk findings?
So through the chair, with respect to the 3 moderate risk items, which is the building asset management plan, so that's actually been reviewed and that's been presented to the council for its consideration at the June council meeting. With regard to the accounts payable finding, that has already been instigated, so with each payment run, a audit file is actually provided, and that's along with the authorisation of that payment run, which includes those master file changes, so that's been instigated, and as with the bank reconciliations and as all reconciliations, they are independently reviewed. It's just, as I said, the sample that they chose wasn't reviewed for the circumstances that we explained in the management letter, and they are so they are reviewed.
Is there any other questions or comments? No, you're all good. I think it's important to note, you can see on page 12, Galpins has shown the sort of the progress from 2020 to 2024, and the controls that are operating effectively, which shows that we've kept improving year on year, which is good, and yeah, and I think the management responses to the findings is adequate, and they're easily resolved. Just making sure that ones that, you know, the progress we've made this year in the future years, like next year, we don't kind of, you know, regress back. I was surprised that one that, you know, was effective last year wasn't effective this year, but then you've explained that with the sample size. So that's pretty much all I had to say on that. Okay, so we've noted the interim audit management letter. Have I got a mover? Peter, seconder, Mayor Redman, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, item 6.2 is the third budget update. Do you want to talk to this one, Sharon?
So I suppose in relation to this, it's pleasing that the discussion following the last mid-year update and the discussion with staff members in the need that if there is actually budget overruns, that they actually have to find other areas of the business or how they're actually going to compensate that. So Erin and Victoria and Renee and the team have worked well with the business to actually ensure that money or areas where they don't think that, I suppose those overruns or where those expenditure overruns or areas where we don't think that we're going to actually meet the expenditure budget, we have actually modified our position so that we can actually still deliver on it and anticipate to deliver a operating deficit of 1.9 million. There has been a decrease in the capital expenditure, which had, and the reasons for that, those decreases have been outlined in the report. And obviously there's the recommendation with regard to the carry forwards, which we actually will incorporate into the 24-25 budget, which takes into account $1.9 million worth of capital expenditures. And that's just basically the delivery of some works that, one where we've only just recently been notified that we were successful in receiving the funding, so obviously we couldn't have committed any expenditure before that date because that was dependent on the capital or the grant funding. And then there's one operating initiative which is in relation to the emergency climate review, EV transition vehicle transition, which that's been deferred, so we can actually do a holistic viewpoint review of our vehicle fleet and making sure that the replacement vehicles that we're actually providing for are actually fit for purpose and the right vehicle for the job that they actually want to perform.
Okay. Thanks, Sharon. Are there any questions or comments? Peter?
Application, you've included these 3 items in the annual plan, the budget for next year. Is that correct? Not at this stage?
No, not at this stage. However, effectively, from that perspective, is that obviously the carry forward capital forwards will actually get funded from borrowings that we had planned to take this year that we won't, that will actually defer from a timing perspective. And with regard to the $15,000, obviously that will just increase the operating deficit by that $15,000. But we're not spending it this year. But we're not actually, I suppose, we're not re-rating for that additional $15,000, I think, which is the concern that some people have with regard to carry forward expenditure, that we've collected for it in this year and we're collecting again in the second year. We won't be collecting in that second year. We've only collect from the ratepayer from once.
Just to add on to that, are there any other carriage forwards likely to appear in the? I mean, often there are a long list of carry forwards, so this is probably not the only ones that will appear before. And often they're adjusted at the first budget review and that sort of thing. So, is that likely to happen here?
I think from a recurrent perspective, or an operating initiative perspective, no, because I think essentially most of the operating initiatives have been delivered on, or a decision is because of resourcing or something that we're actually not going to do it. So I'm not expecting any additional carry forward from an operating perspective. From a capital perspective, there may be, it just depending on the timing of the delivery of the works. And in some situations that may be a bit of a lag, but I think as we get through closer to 30th of June, we'll manage that. So if works are actually completed but the invoicing hasn't happened, we will deal that from an end of year perspective and accrue those expenses so we don't actually have that carried forward. But I can't guarantee. Wendy might be able to add some extra about whether there's any potential projects that we think are going to be finished by 30th of June that may trail over.
Yeah, so through the chair, so we've identified all the major capital carry forward, but I would expect there'll still be some little dribs and drabs of, the last 5 and 10% of some of probably the smaller projects. So it's little dribs and drabs that will still come forward in that Q1 review. But I mean, all effort is being made to close out as much as humanly possible.
Yep. Is there any other questions, comments? No. I think we just want to make sure that, carry forwards happen, but we want to make sure that we keep on track with the projects and also making sure that it's communicated. If we're at the beginning of the year, if we're saying, well, this is our asset management plan, or this is what we're planning to do for the year and achieve it, and then we haven't executed those projects due to whatever reason, we need to make sure that that's clearly communicated. And because of the whole, I know a lot of things got deferred during COVID, but we can't really use that as an excuse anymore. We're all getting back to normal. I mean, it's happening across, local and state government, but it's just making sure that we're delivering and doing what we say we're going to do is really, really important.
I just, through you, Natalie, I think as well, as I suppose as an executive team, we're more cognizant of that as well. And like we do have a project management governance group,
Yep.
which effectively the way we're actually now running that group is that we're meeting on a quarterly basis to give that update, but effectively we're doing it the month before the budget. The quarterly budget review is due, so effectively that information that comes through those quarterly updates especially from a project delivery perspective, is as current as possibly can be, and through that process we'll actually identify if there's any, I suppose, major deferrals or major roadblocks or in that project delivery, and that will come through those budget reviews. So we have changed, I suppose, a bit of that management process and how we actually deal with that and the timing of that, because I think in the past some of this stuff has come out after we've done the budget review, and it's sort of like, it would be nice to actually do it before the budget review so we can actually communicate that stuff as well. So,
and it's thinking about, you know, the timing of when you're going to market for quotes, and, you know, people's work schedules, thinking, you know, they all shut down over Christmas, and just trying to, you know, manage you know, external factors to get these projects delivered by 30 June. Yep. All right, so we have a recommendation that we receive and note the third budget update, that we recommend that the FY25 budget include the carry forwards as noted, and we recommend to Council that the third budget update as contained in attachment 1 be adopted. Now, Peter, you said you're happy to move that. Seconder, Mayor Redman. All in favour? Carried unanimously. All right. Item 6.3 is a policy review. And so we're looking at adopting the following policies, being the strategic rating policy, budget management policy and budget review policy. Happy to move straight away? Oh, Peter's got a question. Just put your microphone on, Peter.
On page 69 of 203, at the top there, 3211. Just wasn't sure how to interpret this phrasing. It says, Council will determine a base general rate. The base general rate shall be applied to properties contained within residential, primary production and other land use codes. That is base rate singular. And percentage loadings on the base general rate will then apply on other land use categories. Does that make sense?
it makes sense because I know the intent of it, but maybe it doesn't make sense to the general public. So obviously, what it's actually saying is to sit there and say, okay, well, we will determine a base rate, which is our general rate, and that general rate will be applied to residential, primary production, and other land use codes. So those land use codes, residential, and I think it's the other because other is a classification within the land use, and then effectively a percentage loading, or maybe a loading, probably maybe take out that word percentage, a loading on the base rate will be applied to other land uses. And so this is explaining the differential rate, to say that we're actually going to apply a differential rate loading to vacant land and also to commercial and industrial.
Wondering if it could be phrased a little bit, perhaps better. I don't think we have to do that. Maybe we can leave it to you to, but you understand what I'm trying to get at. I'll just leave it for that.
So, I've got a question.
Sorry, do you want to put your microphone on? Push the button.
A differential rate loading above the base general rate will apply on all commercial and industrial properties in consideration of the following factors: valuation methods, overall service. Is that still a tiered rating policy?
So the rate, the loading is actually the differential. What you're talking about is the Section 158 adjustment that we actually provide. So this 3.2.11 section sits there and says we're actually going to have a general rate. We're going to have a general rate, and then we're going to have two differential rates. The adjustment, or that tiered rating that you're talking about, is the Section 158 adjustment, where we actually adjust, I suppose, we remit a portion of the commercial rate based on their value. So that is still in there, but so it is in there, but effectively it's two sections of the Act. So the first section, I think it's 154, 150 or something like that, that talks about that we can apply differential rates, so we don't have to have a flat rate. And then in section 158, which talks about that we can actually set a minimum, and then we can actually adjust the rates based on value for a particular class, which we've applied to the commercial and industrial. So that still applies. That is actually considered in where is that? Have we not put it in here? No, we have to probably add that. So that's a good question. Yep. Yep. Oh, it's actually in C, but it's probably not very clear. It's in 3.2.1.1, Part C. Yeah, it's. But I think what I might do is, because that's two different parts of the Act, that the differential loading and that tiered adjustment is actually under. I'll put that a bit clearer. Because I thought we'd had it in there, because we can't apply it if we don't have it in our trading policy. So I'll just make that a bit clearer.
And then the question I had was looking at the budget management and budget review policies. Is that more the changes that are made for budget management, that was just being more clear about how the long-term financial plan and the other documents form part of that budget management, and the same with budget review, the changes were for more clarity more than anything?
Essentially. So from a budget management policy, so I probably see that the budget management is that holistic approach to how we actually manage the budgets, and from an developing our adopted budget.
Yeah.
And it's probably more, whereas, because the budget review stuff, elements were within that budget management policy.
Okay. Yep.
So we've actually just extracted them out into a separate policy, because I think that that's actually easier to communicate and manage with from a staffing perspective, especially with new staff, because while we have all policies and, you read them once, you don't necessarily read them a second time, and ploughing through a long document that talks about budgets and then budget reviews, I just felt as though it was probably a bit more easier to read and provide that extra clarity.
Yep.
And again, it's that stuff about in the budget management policy, it's all about that fiscal discipline and the general principles of setting the budget.
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you. All right, are there any other questions or comments? So we've got this recommendation has been moved by Mayor Redmond, is seconded by... So we've got, yes, so we've got the yep.
Yep. Yep.
And Part C.
Yeah, it's probably, yeah. Yep. I think if the committee's okay, we'll leave it as amended, and then when we'll issue the minutes, we'll actually explain what the changes are. We'll add more detail when we draft the minutes, yep, as to what the changes are.
Cool. Do I have a seconder? Peter, happy to second it? All in favour? Carried unanimously.
I'm going to set a new record.
All right, item 6.4 is the internal audit work plan update, with the Audit and Risk Committee recommending to Council that the internal audit plan be adopted and the acting CEO be authorised to make changes of a minor or technical nature to the internal audit plan adopted by Council. Quite good. Are there any comments? No. Peter, did you have any comments or questions? Can you say that on the record, Mayor Redmond?
I think it's a really, really good report. Thank you, Nathan. Where are you, Nathan? Yeah, fantastic. Really good report.
Just pop your microphone on, Peter. So we can all hear.
In relation to, I understand the report that the consultants have done on this ESCOSA, preparation for the ESCOSA review. I'm just wondering if verbally you can give us a bit of an update as to what their sort of findings, recommendations might be, and whether it has any implications for Council's budget for next year, or annual plan for next year.
Through you, Natalie. Unfortunately, no. I can't give you any updates. We did plan to, we were hoping that we would actually have the findings so we could actually provide them at this meeting. However, I think from Bentley's perspective, they have actually done a very thorough review, and they've collected a lot of data and a lot of information, and I think that they've probably overwhelmed themselves with the amount of information that they've collected, and probably a bit about the level of information that we've actually also provided in, I suppose, in our frank and honest feedback that we've actually provided to them as to where we think areas that they need to look at from as to where we think that we will be exposed. I might take this opportunity, if you don't mind, Natalie, to actually update the committee. So we have had an initial meeting with the SCOSA. So Andrew and I met with them probably a couple of weeks ago, I think. So 2 or 3 weeks ago. So they just asked for an introductory meeting. That was to pretty much explain the process to us, but also, I suppose, have that discussion with us to actually understand the context of some of the situations that probably don't come through the numbers and don't come through the plans and don't come through the asset, like the budget and the financials and all that sort of stuff. So I think that was actually quite a very fruitful discussion that we actually had with them. So I think they accept that obviously this is their third round, that they've actually improved and have learned through the process and understanding that the importance for them to actually engage with the councils that are being reviewed early and upfront, and making sure that it's not necessarily a process to slap councils on the hand, but I suppose it is that independent review to have apply a different lens on the council to give those areas and opportunities and identify those things for council potentially to look out through that process. So I think that was successful. They have actually asked for information, so that ex-SCOSA process has already commenced, I think. So from our perspective, we have to provide all the information to them by, I think, October, and then the report will come back in February. So I'll keep you up to date as we go through. But from the findings perspective, I suspect some things that probably you already know about, that there's not necessarily clear linkages between asset management plans, long-term financial plans, and all that sort of stuff, and making sure that they flow through from that perspective is probably some of the findings that they'll come through with. Again, some of the things as to whether I suppose the extent that we're actually been collecting rates have been sufficient for the growth in the expenditure, or if there's been too much of a growth in expenditure, which again we all recognise that we need to actually address, and this budget cycle is probably that same. This process, I don't think that there's anything that's going to come out of there to sit there and say that we can actually implement or incorporate in the budget per se, but I think that will actually help us form a better focal point on where we actually need to address the parts of our budget that effectively that we need to address to actually reduce, to return back to surplus, I think is what I would like to get out of it.
Partly why I was asking the question as to whether there are any thoughts that they have had in the process, having gone through this precursor to the real thing, as to whether there was anything in there that could help the council understand its responsibilities now, as opposed to waiting another 12 months. And so if there was, then maybe some of that should be highlighted to the elected members at this point in the cycle.
Through you, Natalie. And that was one of the intents, I suppose, the intentions and the intent behind asking Bentleys to actually do that as well. Because I suppose in the back of my mind, we knew that we actually had to do some, we had some challenges with regard to the budget and that process, and whether it is, we can actually identify those early, so we can actually start rectifying or addressing some of those issues, which we're currently doing now, as we are going through that process. But I suppose it's always having that nice independent lens over it to make sure that we are focusing our energies in the right area rather than where we think that we should be focusing them on, I think is from my perspective, because we could, I suppose, burn a lot of rubber on areas of the business that may not necessarily, result in much reduction in cost or change in process and all that sort of stuff, because that's where we think the best area to focus in. So it takes that, I suppose, that emotional aspect out of it by having someone independently look at the business and looking at those processes that they know that ASCOSA will actually look at.
Yep.
So if I may just follow on from that, so how will you deal with the elected members in relation to conveying that thing? Is that something you would deal with once you get the public consultation outcomes? It just seems to me it'd be useful for them to be aware of this thing formally, although it's not a final report as yet. Maybe it will come in the next little while anyway, while the consultation's on. But then it's possible then perhaps to brief the council on some of the concerns that they wish to highlight, and it would reinforce the fact that it's not just the audit committee banging on about these things or staff banging on about it. There's other independent people banging on about it as well. It might just help the case, if you like.
So discussions with Bentley's is that we're hoping to get the initial, if it's not the final report, but the initial findings by the end of this week, and then effectively for the May council meeting, I'll be presenting, obviously, just an information report to the council, just to give them an update on this is what we did and this is the findings, and I'll include yourselves in that report as well, because obviously the intent was trying to get it to this meeting so we could communicate it through. It's just it just didn't work out that way from that perspective, but the intent is to actually write a report, to present a report at the May council meeting with the initial findings, because I suspect they probably won't have the final report by the end of the month, but they did sit there and say they have committed to delivering their initial findings and thoughts to us.
Having one of their partner or someone come out and actually talk to the elected members about it as well. I mean, just as an overview, that might be something that might be worth considering.
Potentially, as well. I suppose I'm blind. I'm flying a bit blind at the moment as to I don't know what their findings are. So I think, but it may be of value to have someone there present for council members to ask questions of, if they have questions.
Any other comments or questions in regards to that? But I agree with you, Peter, that I think involve the audit and risk committee, like with the along the way, just to make sure that we're responding in the right way, etc., etc. There's no surprises. That's it. All right. So yes, we've got the recommendation that we adopt the internal audit plan, and yep, the CEO is authorised to make minor changes. Have I got a mover? Mayor Redmond, and seconded by Peter. All in favour? Carried unanimously. All right, 6.5 is setting the next ordinary risk and audit committee meeting date for the 2nd of July 2024. Yep, so Mayor Redmond's moving that one, seconded by Peter. All in favour, carried unanimously. That's fine. All right, so going to item 7, which is the information reports. The first one, 7.1, is the risk management update. with recommendation that we receive and note the risk management update. Nathan, did you want to comment on that?
Through the chair, thank you. As discussed in previous audit committees, we have been working our way through our strategic risk register. We've almost completed the operational risk register, identifying business risk controls in place, and also with are those risks within appetite or not. We still have a couple departments still to work through, but yeah, just slowly working our way through it. Once we do have the full sheet, that will then all be exported into control track, where we'll be able to do control assessments similar to financial control assessments. Yeah, thank you.
Yep, Mayor Redmond.
We've got 23 extreme risk rating. How will the organisation manage 23 extreme inherent risk scores? Thank you.
Through the chair. So those 23 inherent risk scores are risk ratings without any controls in place, so no policies, procedures, training of staff. That is what it would look like basically if you just came to work and did a job. Once we've put controls in place, now those controls could be management plans, guidelines, training needs analysis. We've been able to reduce that risk score to in general, either a medium or a low risk rating. Yeah. Does that help at all?
So you're putting internal controls in place?
That is correct. So yes, all of the extreme initial risks have all got controls in place. Some of them might only be 3 or 4 controls. Some of the other areas might be 10 to 15 controls in place. Some of these are key controls that help a lot more than others, but yes, they all have controls in place. Phase 2, which will probably be late this year, if not next year, that's when we'll start doing the control assessment. So we'll start to be testing those controls to see are they designed effectively and operating. It's just an extra layer of rigour moving forwards.
Are there any other questions or comments? Happy with the response? I think it's sort of the risk journey that the council's going on. So it's, yeah, as we go through each stage, it's, you know, identifying all the risks without controls and then ensuring that those controls are in place to reduce the severity of those risks without the big thing to note is, yeah, not to paralyse the business while we're doing it, or being so worried about risk that we're over controlling. You've got to have there's always going to be some form of risk. You just want to make sure that it's not detrimental to employees or the business. All right. Peter, did you have any comments on that? You happy to move it? So moved by Peter, seconded by Mayor Redmond. All in favour, carried unanimously. Well done. Okay, 7.2 is the draft 24-25 annual business plan, and the Audit and Risk Committee to receive and note the draft business plan and budget report. Are there any, just for our information, are there any questions or comments? You go, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, this is out and about already. We've discussed this in the past. I did notice that there was no figure in there for the waste management service charge. Is that not, and is that for public consultation? Should there not have been a figure in there, or hasn't that been considered yet? Or?
It has been considered, but effectively at the time that this was released that the number wasn't available Yeah, so it's around $240, which is about $2 increase on last year. Yeah, no.
All right, are there any other questions or comments on that? Moved by Mayor Redmond. Do I have a seconder? Peter, all in favour? Carry unanimously. All right, so then item 8 is the items listed for discussion, which there are none. Item 9 is questions without notice, which there are none. Item 10 is motions without notice, and there are none. Then we'll move on to item 11, which is the confidential reports. So we'll need to move into confidence. Have I got someone that is happy to move us into confidence? Yep, Mayor Redmond.
In accordance with sections 83.5 and 84.6 of the Local Government Act 1999, the Chief Executive Officer considers that this item may be considered in confidence by the Council pursuant to section 90, part 3, on the grounds that it relates to information, the disclosure of which would divulge information provided on a confidential basis by or to a Minister of the Crown or another public authority or official not being an employee of the Council or a person engaged by the Council, and would on balance be contrary to the public interest.
Okay. So for the purposes of those watching at home, our seconder is to move into confidence. Peter, you happy to second us moving into confidence? Yep. So, yep. Okay, and so for the purposes of those watching at home, as per the officer's recommendation, the following matter will be discussed in confidence. So we will be suspending the live stream now and closing the meeting following the consideration